a few days ago, we sent a group of astronauts around the moon. Nobody cared. But the moon, in and of itself, with the Apollo missions and with the fact that if you drop something on it, it rings like a bell, which is fact, it actually does. There's all this weird there. And nobody gave a crap about this mission.
When most people hear the phrase conspiracy theory, there's an almost automatic reaction. It usually gets lumped into the category of something fringe, exaggerated, or already debunked. And to be fair, a lot of conspiracy theories do fall apart under scrutiny. They rely on weak evidence, assumptions, or connecting dots that don't actually connect. But every once in a while, something that was dismissed as a conspiracy theory turns out to have at least some basis in reality. And that's where things get complicated. Because if even a small number of those cases turn out to be true, then it raises a bigger question about how we decide what to trust in the first place. Is it reasonable to stay skeptical? Or does that open the door to questioning everything? Because once you accept that some conspiracies have been real, it becomes a lot harder to draw a clear line between skepticism and suspicion. So it raises the question, if conspiracies sometimes turn out to be true, how do we decide what deserves to be taken seriously and what doesn't? And maybe even more importantly, what does that do to our ability to trust anything at all?
All right, Michael, do you want to get started with a good 5 or so minute rant on chemtrails and stuff?
Well, I think we can just sum this up by some things just sound too stupid. But beyond that, some things are just not within the boundaries of physics or science. And those things, yeah, chemtrails, geoengineering, whatever. Not cloud seeding. That's a real thing. Although used a lot less than people think it is because it requires specific conditions to work. But yeah, it's one of those that's one of those conspiracies that is stupid because it does not pass the basics of science, physics. It's one of those things that we were talking in the pre-show about stuff we've heard about for 30 years. That's another thing I've heard about for 30 years. And it's been debunked time and time again. And it's not there's a lot of bad conspiracy theories, but some things that sound plausible, at least I'm willing to entertain. There's a lot of things that I think have some root in reality about, what really happened to JFK. I mean, it's not as simple as somebody in a book depository shot him. It's a lot more, it's a lot deeper than that. There's conspiracies around, well, obviously, I don't know. I always mention the World War II, that we let the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor. I fully believe that. And then there's been other things throughout history that at least have some basis in reality. Some things just don't pass the smell test, Dan. I guess that's my point.
No, some things don't, but some things, to Beth's question, if true, how do we decide if some are true, how do we decide what's worth believing? And you're right, some things just flat don't pass a smell test, like the whole chemtrails thing. But there are some things that there's just enough weirdness that it makes you at least wonder. One of my biggest ones is the moon, for example. The moon makes no sense. There's so many things about it that don't make any sense. There's all sorts of conspiracy theories around it. Did we actually go there? Is the thing hollow? Is it a spaceship? Why is it so close? Why is its orbit just so exacting and all this kind of stuff? And, for me, as that one as an example, there are some things where there's just enough weirdness around it that it at least gives you pause. Yeah, that's weird. I want to know more.
I think it's weird that since you're talking about the moon, that there's all sorts of evidence from prior civilizations that reference the time before the moon.
Yeah. That is true as well.
That is very weird.
Yeah. There's ancient cultures that have references to when the moon showed up.
Well,
What's that all about?
Yeah, and the thing about a lot of these conspiracy theories is that we, as people, we don't just like to say I don't know. We like to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
And we like to come up with answers to things even if we don't know. And sometimes we just let the imaginations run wild, and that's how we come up with a theory as to what happened. You know, there's a lot of things that we're probably never going to totally know. Now, that said, you know, things like aliens, I know that there are people that don't believe that it's possible for aliens to exist. And I would say that's silly. In a, for all intents and purposes, infinite universe, the idea that there's no other life out there seems incalculably impossible. It just doesn't make sense. But I don't know. I also don't have a logical, and the other thing is I don't have a logical explanation for all the UFOs. And the fact is the government has even kind of come out and said, yeah, you know, we've encountered a lot of UFOs. We've run into some extraterrestrial stuff. And, you know, that was just so casually thrown out there. That, you know, that's one of those things that's kind of true. Now, how true it is, who knows? I mean, you know, it's government. We don't know. But again, there's a lot there. Now, there's some things we just can't answer, and that doesn't mean that there's a conspiracy. It just means that we don't have the means to be able to answer the question. But that doesn't stop people from thinking that there's something nefarious.
Well, yeah, I think that yeah, again, kind of to Beth's point in the lead-in, there's some things that we've seen over time where everybody's like, oh, this is a conspiracy. This never really happened. And then it's declassified. And yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, look at a lot of the CIA operations, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
Where like deny. Yeah, we did those things. And crazy stuff too. I mean, well, some people would call it crazy. I guess it's up to you as to whether or not you think it's crazy, but like remote viewing and stuff like that, everybody poo-pooed that forever. No, they've actually worked on that. That's been declassified. That's things they've been trying to make work.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
That
and
was Stargate, right?
yeah.
But there's enough of that stuff that, yeah, I think it gives everybody the license now to just immediately jump to, you know, these things are being hidden from us because there's enough proof that it's been done in the past.
Well, not only that, but it's one of those things that it's always interesting. You know, it's what gets more attention, you know, on TV or in social media. I mean, obviously the more sensational, the more attention it's going to get. And so there's always this rush to get out there and come up with a conspiracy theory. Sometimes you don't even have to believe it. It's just done for the engagement, but then some people do believe it. And so some of these things just grow legs on their own. Especially nowadays, because everybody has access to computer. Everybody has access to making videos basically and uploading stuff on YouTube. And you can, again, as Beth said, connect the dots that aren't even there, but you know, it doesn't stop people from doing it, or maybe even stretching the truth, or just making up stuff, or finding sources that aren't credible, but they use them as credible, or whatever. And there's a whole corner of the world, a whole corner of the internet that's just reserved for all of that. I mean, if it weren't for conspiracies, crazy ass Alex Jones and some of these other guys would have never had a career. That have been failed talk show hosts, you know, 25 years ago. They would have never gone anywhere. But because they found a niche and they can go out there and yell about gay frogs, they are, you know, I would say they made money. Now, Alex Jones is kind of broke because, you know, he took it a little too far and got sued for defamation and lost like $1 billion. But other than that, There is a whole cottage industry of conspiracy theorists. And how do you tell what's false? Well, usually if they're saying it, it is. But I would say, I'll say this though. The whole, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Once in a while, these guys are going to hit on something that is true. And that's the thing too, is how you rope people into them is you bring up the true stuff and you get people saying, yeah, of course that happened. And then what you do is it's the old car salesman technique, and then you just keep them saying yes. And then you rope them into some other conspiracy that either you just made up or that's widely made up. And that's how these things just keep going.
Yeah. But there's some weird here though. I was just thinking about this while you were talking, Mike. So we have some conspiracy theories and people hold them so true, but then at the same time almost ignore it. Example, a few days ago, we sent a group of astronauts around the moon. Nobody cared. But the moon, in and of itself, with the Apollo missions and with the fact that if you drop something on it, it rings like a bell, which is fact, it actually does. There's all this weird there. And nobody gave a crap about this mission. It was never front page news. It was never overly talked about, just, quick little spots on the news here and there. It did not garner attention. And that in and of itself is odd and almost a conspiracy theory on its own. Because how is it that something that has been so debated and so doubted for so long, and here's something happening that would prove or disprove or whatever, gets no attention? And there was this weird, and I mentioned this, I think, on the pre-show for TCF 1.2. There was this weird post on X from NASA, where they said that Artemis 2 is going to be the first ever humans to lay eyes on the dark side of the moon, completely forgetting about the Apollo missions that orbited around the dark side of the moon. So that even fueled into the conspiracy theory, and nobody cared. I'm to the point where, and I don't know if we're just flooded with so much of this, we're exhausted from it or what, but it wouldn't surprise me. Trump's talking about aliens now, so we're going to find out about aliens soon. Well, we'll see. But it wouldn't surprise me if the government came out and said, yep, they're here. Here's what they look like. We've known about them for this long. And everybody goes, huh, that's neat. And then keeps flipping through their channels.
Well, there's a number of reasons I could speculate as to why a lot of this stuff just kind of gets swept under the rug. And again, maybe it's because just everything is so sensational in the news now that going to the moon doesn't really seem that wild anymore. In 1969, we land on the moon, and that's a big deal. But, 57 years later, not so much a big deal because, well, people don't have time for that because they're, oh, we're bombing this country and gas prices are this and groceries that. And then, oh, what about another outrageous scandal among politicians and just thing after thing after thing after thing that just keeps happening. And, stuff like that it's not as exciting because we send rockets to space all the time. Sure, not to the moon, but it's one of those things that, frankly, it used to be on all the networks whenever there was a space shuttle launch, right? Of course it got covered. We'd watch it when I was in school. We watched all of them. I mean, that's how we saw Challenger explode. But I mean, and even after Challenger, though, all the launches, it's a big deal. It was a huge deal. Now it's such a common thing. We just are like, okay, neat. Another launch.
But it even surprised me, Mike, with that specific thing there, that we didn't even see a whole lot of activity around debunking that mission. Because the people who were debunking Apollo for the last, 50 or whatever years, you would think they would be trying to debunk this too, but even that was quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
which is just, I don't know. The whole thing just struck me as so bizarre,
it is. It is strange.
and again, almost its own conspiracy theory in a way. Why is this thing that would essentially prove or disprove something that people have held in doubt for so long just pretty much ignored?
Yeah. Both
Um,
sides, it seemed like, ignored
yeah.
it.
So I don't know. I think maybe we're just all exhausted from it all.
Maybe that's what it is. I mean, that might just be the simplest explanation there. It's one of those, people just have fatigue from all the different kind of stories. And so one thing kind of sounds like the other. Sure, to you and I, maybe not, but to the public at large, okay, moon landing, or orbiting the moon or going to Mars, that sounds like, oh, another outrageous Trump press conference or bombing Iran or, another, nuclear missile test by North Korea or whatever. I mean, it all just kind of runs together. It all just comes into the background noise because you just keep getting hammered with it 24/7. And frankly, and this has just been one of those things that's documented too, fewer and fewer people pay attention to news.
That is true.
That is true.
So, with a smaller audience of people paying, and the people that generally do pay attention are, Gen X and older. Maybe the older side of the millennials, but I mean, the youths, not to say they don't follow any news, but a lot of their news, is compressed into it's in TikTok, it's on Instagram, it's on Twitter X and all it's there. That's where they find it. It's they're not going to CNN, they're not going to MS Now or ABC, NBC, CBS, Drudge, whatever. They're not going to those places. They're going to their social media, and social media, a lot of these guys, it's centered around whatever it is that they're interested in. And generally speaking, not to say that not a single young person cares, but I mean, for the most part, it's not top of their mind.
Well, yeah, they're going to be shown what they care about, because and what interests them and what will keep them on the platform. That is where social media has totally screwed us over.
Yeah.
And maybe that's carrying into the conspiracy theory end of things too, and what people believe and don't believe and all of that. But you say they go there for news. They don't. They go there to be affirmed in their beliefs.
Well, yeah.
That's
I should news in air quotes,
Yeah.
And that's, I guess that's kind of sad. I suppose it does make for, I don't know, more ignorant society, but maybe ignorance is bliss. I don't know. There's a couple of ways to look at that too, but that's how a lot of these conspiracy theories get going too, is because critical thinking, I think, is it may not be dead, but it's on life support,
Well, that's a good point. Again, Beth's end question was, how do you decide what is worth believing? And for me, it's giving it critical thought. So that's a good way to put it, because if you go back to like the JFK thing, for example, if you look at it critically, there's just too much going on there, too many different holes in the story, too many different pieces of evidence to believe that beyond a shadow of a doubt, Oswald acted alone.
Yeah.
Taking the worst shot to do it.
Right.
None of it makes sense.
None of it makes sense.
If you look at it critically, if you give it critical thought.
Now, I don't know what happened, but I know that what the official story was doesn't make sense. And if the old saying is, if it doesn't make sense, it's probably not true.
Yeah. There's all sorts of theories. This one is never mentioned, but I'd seen it a few years ago, just real quick, because I find it interesting, is that he was actually accidentally killed by one of his own Secret Service agents. So the shots rang out and stuff. And there's a little bit in the film that, if you interpret it the right way, actually supports this. But there was an agent behind him who drew his weapon when he heard the shots. And the theory is, as he was drawing, the vehicle accelerated and it caused him to fire. And that was the kill shot that hit him and blew out his skull.
That's interesting.
And they think this because that agent has never been heard from since that day. He was like put in a hole somewhere. So
Very
anyways,
strange.
little
Yeah.
side tangent, but again, there's questions like that if you look at it critically, you go, yeah, there's enough there that you need to answer a lot of questions for me to believe this. But you know, who really gives things critical thought anymore?
And that's the issue.
Yeah. No, and so how do you decide what to believe, Beth? I think in the end, the answer is most people just choose not to believe anything, or they'll choose to believe the ridiculous because it's sensational and it shows up in their feeds.
Or some people are just trolling and they just like to make other people mad by saying, yeah, the earth is flat.
There's some of that too.
Yeah. Some of it, though, is, I would say, questionable to pass the sniff test or critical thinking test, but it actually still was true and has been proven true.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to talk about like CIA things, like MK Ultra, for example, is insane when you actually think about it.
Yeah.
And should never have happened, but it did, and there's proof.
Yeah. No, and then there's the inverse of things that did happen, and the conspiracy theory is that it never happened. See also Germany in the 1940s.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, there's people that believe that whole thing didn't even happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is probably even more bizarre because it's one of those things where there's so much overwhelming amount of evidence that it did to suggest that it didn't. Again, you either have to be trolling or you're just playing up to some fanatical base, or it's just your own hatred, you know, that exists and it clouds your mind. I don't know. That's the only logical explanation for that.
How else would you get so many different governments that normally don't agree on anything to agree to the same story? That's where the fact that the non-believers don't pass the smell test to me, because like, since when is Russia and the United States both going to go, yep, same story, that's exactly what happened?
Right.
Well, it was part of the deal that they made when they divvied up the scientists.
Oh,
Yes.
I see. Okay.
And this is how conspiracy theories begin, just like that.
But
Mike
if nothing,
after dark.
but if nothing,
I know
actually,
the light just there it goes.
but if nothing actually happened, then why did they have all those scientists that had all that knowledge?
Aliens. The scientists are aliens.
I see.
Gotta be.
See, it all circles around.
Okay.
Hey, thanks for watching. In the Blind is a news show for Mike and me, and we'd really love it if you could hit the subscribe button, do a thumbs up, leave a comment. All of those things really help this channel get found by other people, so we'd really appreciate the support. Thanks so much.